Welcome to the RotoWire Fantasy Basketball Podcast presented by DraftKings Pick 6. Brandon Kravitz along with Nick Whalen on this Tuesday. No NBA tonight, election day. Hopefully everybody able to get out and vote. Kind of wish I could sit back and watch and bet on a Kings-Clippers game tonight, but we press on. Coming up on today's pod, we're handing things off to you for the bounce. Make sure you get those questions in, and we will wrap today's podcast with a flurry of those. Nick, we had 15 games in the NBA last night. My head is still spinning trying to consume everything that we had in front of us, and we'll try and make our way through it the best that we can. But after an exciting night, kind of a dull day in the sports world.
Yeah, I mean, it is what it is. NBA kind of stepping aside for election night, which makes sense. But that led us to a massive night in the NBA. Last night, we had seemingly every college basketball team in the country also in action. We had Monday Night Football. I mean, it was great. It was a little overwhelming for guys like us who tried to follow everything. I had to spend a good couple hours last night watching cut up highlights of all the NBA games, watching cut up highlights of all the NBA draft prospects who were playing last night. But we'll try to get through as much of the slate as we can. I mean, a rare night when all 30 teams are in action. Did have a decent amount of close games, starting with the first game that tipped off essentially was Bucks Cavaliers. And, obviously no Giannis for Milwaukee. He is one of 4 players on my stake league fantasy team currently dealing with an adductor strain. I've become very familiar with this injury. I am doing very, very, very poorly in that league because of this. But the Bucks,
Dr. Whalen, how do you want to? Can you let us in on what hampers a player when they're dealing with the adductor? Now that you have
some sort of hip thing, I guess.
Yep,
okay. All I know is that CJ McCollum, Zach LaVine, Giannis, and then I forget who the other one was, are all dealing with this injury. I also have Scotty Barnes in that league. So things started off really well, and I've lost. It's a 16-team league, roto categories. I've literally lost like 45 category points just in the last 5 days because my entire team has been injured.
And this is the one that you bid heavy on the top guys. I remember you saying you went counter to the normal strategy. So are you now going to be averse to trying that again in the future, just based on the way this season has started? We have to see it play out first.
Not really, because before all the injury, I mean, small sample, of course, we're talking like a week and a half, but things were looking really good. I actually really liked how the team was coming together. So I'm just going to have to live with being in the basement for at least a couple more weeks and just really hope that everybody stays healthy the rest of the way and kind of climb my way back. And, hopefully the injury luck kind of evens out. I've never been hit with injuries this bad this soon in a season where it just feels like you're just in a holding pattern. Like I'm starting Garrison Matthews in that league. That's how bad it is. Like I'm just scraping together a lineup in a 16-team league. So we're in a holding pattern there until Barnes is back, until McCollum's back. We'll see how much time Giannis ends up missing, but either way, I mean, the Bucks were able to hang around with the Cavs. The problem is
that's not good enough. I mean, they were up by 7 with a couple minutes left to go. In the fourth, they dropped to 1-6. That was such. And I know the Cavs are good this year, still unbeaten on the season. But they are entering must-win territory at this point.
No, you're right. You're right. And that's what I was going to say. Is like it's all well and good to be like, oh yeah, we played the Cavs tough without Giannis. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you're Milwaukee. I mean, this was not some sort of moral victory, middle of the season game. Prove that we could do it without Giannis. It's like you need to start banking wins, man. It's like 1-6 in the NBA is not 1-6 in the NFL, but you're a team in your own division who you've now lost to twice in the last week is 8-0. I mean, they have a 7-game lead on you in the Central, and there's not a lot of precedent, Brandon, as you know, for teams that start this poorly getting it turned around, right? We've had a lot of really good teams get off to sluggish starts. You think of like when the Heat first got together, weren't they like 4-5 through their first 9 games or something, which felt like the sky was falling, and obviously they flipped the switch and were just fine. There's not a lot of like teams that went on to win the title or went on to make a great playoff run that start the year 1-6, 1-7. That just doesn't really happen. You got to be encouraged. I think that Milwaukee was able to rally in this spot without Giannis because they've showed like no fight whatsoever this season. So like there is still a little bit of positivity there. Bobby Portis had by far his best game of the year, but man, this feels like a dead team walking that kind of knows it's dead already, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're 100% right about that, because it's not like you could chalk this up to, well, Giannis is missing the first couple weeks of the season. Like you look at a team like Philadelphia sitting at 1-5, it feels less dire because you know they're about to get a lot better. This is as good as the Bucks are going to get unless they make some wholesale change. That seems to be the problem with that. Steph back in the lineup for the Warriors last night. That was cool to see. They make quick work of the Wizards, 24 points in 24 minutes. So I guess we're all the way back with Steph. I'm curious to see what kind of minutes he gets tomorrow night against Boston. That's the primetime ESPN game.
Yeah, well, the Warriors, they've had a really soft schedule so far. And part of it is, it looks softer because they're beating all these teams and giving them losses. But, they caught the Pelicans at a time when they were super banged up. They played them twice. They've played a lot of the bottom feeders so far, but they've been really, really impressive, man. They look super consistent. They have found this kind of ragtag group of role players, bench players, cast-offs, the Lindy Waters of the world. And these guys, all seem to kind of understand the Warriors way, if that makes sense. They've all been really good fits. We saw Brandon Pajemski leave that game last night, by the way. I think he was dealing with an illness. So if you see him playing 13 minutes, that is why. But they're running this egalitarian rotation where they want to get, 11, 12 guys involved every single night. You got a lot of guys playing between 12 and 18 minutes. Jonathan Kuminga, looked really good last night. Still only played 25 minutes in a blowout. We'll see with Curry as far as, when they extend that workload. Although I think the more that they can continue to win games and do so in dominant fashion, the less we're going to see Stephen Curry playing 36, 37, 38 minutes, which is very good for his personal longevity. It might not be great for his fantasy ceiling this season, but I mean, Golden State's 6-1, man. I don't think anybody saw this coming. They've been off to a fantastic start, and I think it's been a great coaching job so far by Steve Kerr.
And they're one of the best teams in the league in terms of covering the spread. So they're not just winning; they're winning you money if you're betting on them. They're 6-1 ATS so far on the season. A lot of that is because of what they're doing defensively. Now, you bring up a good point. A lot of that could have to do with the competition they're going up against, but still second best defensive rating in the league so far, behind only OKC, who's lapping the field right now when it comes to defense. And last night, my precious Orlando Magic certainly helped in that statistic. We can skip them entirely today if you want to.
I just want to mention the level of first of all with Golden State. They're number 3 in offense and they're number 2 in defense. And again, the schedule helps. Like when you start the year off with a 36 win or a 36-point win over the Trailblazers, and then you get the worst offense in the NBA and the Jazz the next night, like you're going to build some equity there with the advanced metrics. But still, they have the best net rating in the NBA at plus 17.1. Just behind them is OKC, who is 10 points worse in terms of offensive rating, but has a defensive rating through 7 games now. This is like a somewhat legit sample of 93.4. That is almost 10 points per 100 better than the next best defense in the NBA. It's crazy. I mean, they are 27 points per 100 better than the worst defense.
Crazy. The first bet that I've made for tomorrow, I was going to save this for the end of the episode, but now you got me all worked up about Golden State. Warriors plus 7.5 at Boston.
Yeah, I mean, that'll be their toughest test for sure. That'll be a very tough test. I mean, Boston's coming off a 30-point win last night against Atlanta. By the way, just a terrible game for Trae Young. Only played 23 minutes, ended up leaving with some sort of injury toward the end of the game. But 2 points on 1 of 10 shooting did give you 6 assists, but not quite the night you were looking for there for Trae Young. I do want to mention one more thing on the Warriors, Brandon. I want to get your take on this. I made a trade live on the pod yesterday with Alex. I've been very public about trying to get off of Lauri Markkanen. I was able to do that, and I had to take a bit of a loss on that one. Ended up doing a 5-player deal total. So I gave up Markkanen, and I did something I didn't want to do and gave up Buddy Hield. And I got back Rudy Gobert, Terry Rozier, and Jaden McDaniels.
Okay, so you were clearly after some defensive statistics here. I think it all depends on what your team needs, which is such an obvious sort of analysis when it comes to these trades. But when you get into the season and you realize where you're losing categories, those are the deals that you have to make deals in order to buoy certain areas. If that's the kind of move that you have to make, I mean, Buddy Hield's knocking down. He's taking a ton of threes. So, you hate to miss that on your lineup. But if you need what Rudy Gobert and Jaden McDaniels bring to the table, then you got to do it.
What I need more than anything is to just have a trustworthy guy who I think will play 70-plus games in Gobert. And I just don't think Markkanen's going to do it. I mean, the Jazz, for one, he's a shutdown risk late in the year. And two, even when he gets back healthy, whenever that is, like he's missed like 5 games in a row. The Jazz are getting hammered night to night. It's like there's going to be a lot of nights where he like could play well and only plays 26 minutes because they're down 25 at the end of the third quarter. Like I just wanted to divorce myself from anything to do with this Jazz team that has been so bad this year. And I have Giannis and Scotty Barnes on that team, so free throw percentage is kind of shot anyway, and like that's a big part of Lauri Markkanen's stat profile. I'm basically punting that. The threes are nice, the rebounds are nice. He gives you nothing in terms of defensive stats. He gives you no assists. And the rebounds tend to come and go. Like he still has a lot of those like 6 rebound nights when you're thinking you're going to get 10 or 11. I think Gobert is going to give me a higher floor there. Again, I don't care about the free throw percentage. And I do need blocks and steals. So that was part of the appeal with Gobert. I also just need healthy bodies right now. And like Jaden McDaniels, to me, I think he's one of the most overrated players in the league, especially in terms of fantasy. Good defender, I guess, in real life, but can't really shoot. He was like 0 for 4 from 3 last night. I just need somebody to throw out there and hope that I get, a steal and a block every night. And then also selling high on Buddy Hield, right? It's like Hield's been off to an incredible start. He's like a top 30 fantasy guy on the year, but he's also taking 9 or 10 threes a game. And maybe that continues. Maybe he's kind of the Klay Thompson role, but I just felt like rest of season, especially with Curry back in the mix, what Rozier gives me night to night, I think there's going to be a higher floor there. Just more counting stats in general, whereas Hield is really 3-pointers, points, and free throw percentage, which again, I don't really care about.
Well, and I think that this comes down to you said that you wanted somebody that you can rely on that's going to play closer to 82, and Markkanen already missed some time and a shutdown candidate and all of that. And I think early on, that's one of the things that every year I have to learn this lesson at the start of the season, because you get enamored with names and fantasy rankings and I end up drafting these players thinking I'm getting this great value. The problem is you take a couple of injured guys or players that are unreliable at the start of the season, and all of a sudden you're in complete scramble mode where you just don't, on light nights in the NBA, you just don't have the bench to put in players that are actually going to give you production. And so it's a nice reminder that at the end of the day, we're all chasing certain statistics based on what your team needs. You need guys that go out there and play. And sometimes it is just that simple.
Yeah. And, we're still early in the season. A lot could change, but I think as soon as possible, in a category league, you want to identify strengths and weaknesses. And I think, during your draft, on some platforms, they give you kind of like the live, projection as far as like where you'll be in each category. Those usually are not very reliable, really, for any site. It's not like a specific site is bad. It's just, projections aren't always updated and whatnot. So you might think like, oh, I'm set in assists. And then 2 weeks in, you're like, wow, I'm 14th in assists right now. This isn't good. So, kind of doing that early audit and figuring out which categories can I feasibly do well in, which categories am I really struggling in? Is it worth trying to improve them? Should I punt them? I would encourage everybody, especially in a deep category league, to do some sort of audit, early on and try to narrow down, the categories that you're going to focus on. Like, I had dreams of trying to rescue my free throw percentage category with Giannis, and even with some really good free throw shooters on the team early on, it's like, yeah, this isn't going to happen. So just going to punt that and lean into it.
Yeah, I was staring at my big money league. I have Kawhi Leonard, Isaiah Hartenstein, Asar Thompson. Why? My bench is dying, but I drafted these guys. Like I set myself up for failure, and then to make matters worse, I also have Zion Williamson, who's also elected not to play a couple of games this season. So I'm not going to go down my whole roster, but I've done what you just said about taking the roster audit. I wanted to sit back and not overreact to the first couple of weeks, but I feel like now is a good time to go, okay, where are your deficiencies in terms of your fantasy roster? I've got an all-NBA defensive squad. I cannot score points, so I'm going to have to figure out a way to get a little bit more production there. If I need steals and blocks, I'm blowing my opponents out. But and then it comes down to I'm going to end up making trades that I think on the surface would seem silly, like you have with Lauri Markkanen, but it comes down to what you need. By the way, real quick, circle back to the original conversation about the Warriors and the Celtics. As good as Boston is, and it's not like they have to prove anything to us, let's not overlook the fact that they've had a really soft schedule too. They've played outside of the opening game against New York, which was a really advantageous spot for them because New York's trying to break all these guys in. Wizards, Pistons, the Bucks, Pacers, Hornets twice, and the Hawks. I mean, no, these are not world beaters. The Pacers, yes, and they lost that game to Indiana.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. I mean, I think the Bucks were supposed to be a tough game, and Milwaukee played the Celtics tough in that one, and they lost to the Pacers. But yeah, you got 2 against the Hornets, Pistons, Wizards, Hawks. Yeah, that's just gonna be how it goes, though. They are an Eastern Conference team. It's gonna be an Eastern Conference heavy schedule. But yeah, like you said, big game against the Warriors tomorrow. They get the Nets after that. Another showdown with the Milwaukee Bucks coming up this weekend. After that, though, Hawks, Nets, Raptors. Again, they got another date with the Wizards coming up. I mean, that's just how it's going to be for Boston. It's like how many games do you look at and say, oh, that's going to be really tough? It's like Boston's going to be favored against almost anybody.
There are a couple of tough teams in the East. It just doesn't look like they play any of them for the next several weeks.
They get the Cavs twice in the next month. And man, this Cavs team is just a wagon, man. I love this team. I think they still don't have Max Strus, not that matters a ton, but just adding shooting, they didn't have Karis LeVert last night as well. They had to start Isaac Okoro, who I actually looked this up, has been like literally the most damaging player in the NBA over the last 5 years. I was watching Gary Trent last night, who's just been horrible for Milwaukee. He's like a -20 every single night. And I'm like, he's just not a winning player. Like he has his moments. He's somebody that I'm always picking up and dropping in deeper fantasy leagues, just hoping for the right week. And I was like, he's got to be way down there in terms of like, negative VORP over the last 5 years. And he actually wasn't as bad as I thought. But I looked up like who's been the most damaging advanced stat player in the last 5 years. It was Isaac Okoro.
Well, and having that sort of turn itself around is part of the reason why you look at Cleveland and go, what's different? This is the same exact roster that they had a year ago. I like Kenny Atkinson, but is it that, or are these guys finally starting to gel? Last year they weren't all that healthy. We'll move on. We have other games we want to get to, but is there one quality that you've seen from Cleveland where you say, no, they're definitely better at this, or this guy's better this year? Is it the Okoro factor? I mean, what is it that allows this team to be so much better now than they were a year ago with the same pieces?
I think it's Evan Mobley improvement. Even though the raw numbers don't look that much better, I really think he's taken a step forward. If you watch these games, like he looks significantly more confident. He's way more consistent. Like we saw these highs last year, but it was, he would play well for a week and then he'd kind of disappear for a week. Like he's just been better across the board. Jared Allen is like the most rock solid kind of glue guy, underrated player, I think, at his position in the NBA. And then the biggest factor has been Darius Garland, having some huge games so far. He had 39 last night against Milwaukee. It was not a great night for Donovan Mitchell, who was 5 of 15 from the field. And last year, Darius Garland was either hurt all the time or just wasn't necessarily that guy who was capable of stepping up. And it's like, all right, Donovan Mitchell's not playing well. Garland, we need 30 out of you. We didn't see a lot of those games, and we've already seen a couple this year. So I think it's been the improvement and the health improvement for Garland alongside the next step for Evan Mobley.
How about the Pistons? Talk about a good record against the spread. They're 5-3 against the spread if you've bet on them so far this season. The Lakers have now dropped 3 of their last 4 after starting 3-0 on the year. And I'm really liking what I'm seeing from the backcourt of Cade Cunningham and Jaden Ivey. It seems like they're clicking as a duo right now.
Yeah, this was a really disappointing game for the Lakers. Anthony Davis continues to be incredible on a night-to-night basis. LeBron has just not been very good on balance so far this year. He was a -16 last night in 40 minutes. Just hasn't been super, super efficient. We've seen the highs, of course, from LeBron, but the lows have been a little bit lower than they have in years past. And the Lakers bench is still really, really bad. They got 10 bench points last night compared to 27 for the Detroit Pistons. So it's not like the Pistons have a great bench either, but the Lakers just getting no production out of guys like Cam Reddish, Jackson Hayes, Gabe Vincent. What a bust of a signing that was last summer. And Dalton Connect, fun player, but we got to be realistic about what the expectations are there. Detroit, they're sitting at 3-5 straight up, but they have been a much more competitive team. That was something Alex and I talked a little bit about yesterday. In terms of net rating, they're still in the negatives, but last year they were like a -10 net rating type of team, and they're hanging around that middle zone, right? I mean, they're 19th right now in net rating. They're just much better coached this year. Offensively they're still struggling night to night, but they've been right in the middle of the pack in terms of defense. Like they have the same defensive rating as the Minnesota Timberwolves so far. So we're at least seeing a baseline level of competence for the Pistons that's much higher than last season.
Yeah, and it's funny how it works. We were just talking about the Cavs. They have Kenny Atkinson now. They move off of JB Bickerstaff, and they improve. And then the Pistons move off of Monty Williams, bring in JB Bickerstaff, and they improve. So sometimes it's just about fit. But you're right. The Pistons have they've been playing some scrappy ball. I'm curious to see how the market catches up with them. Nikola Jokic, 28-point triple-double last night, his third on the year. He leads the NBA. No surprise there. But perhaps the bigger storyline, Russell Westbrook, back from the dead. 21 points, 6 assists, 6 boards, a terrible shooting percentage from 3.
Yep.
A vintage Westbrook performance.
I'm out on Russ. I've been out on Russ. I think he is still a damaging player. Good on the Nuggets, I guess, for finding a way to win by 2 at home against the Toronto Raptors. Russ was in the starting lineup last night, which is interesting. Denver still kind of scuffling right now, trying to figure out the right combination of these young role players. Aaron Gordon, by the way, left this game, only played 4 minutes, so keep an eye on his status going forward. They also didn't have Jamal Murray, which is big. He's dealing with a concussion, so a win's a win, certainly if you're Denver. But man, I mean, they've now played the Raptors twice. They beat them twice by a combined 4 points. That's a little bit concerning. They had scraped one out against the Nets last week as well. They did lose to the Timberwolves, beat the Jazz, who are just so bad. Everybody's beating the Jazz. Huge game though tomorrow night for the Denver Nuggets. They are home for the OKC Thunder.
So we did get a big debut last night in the NBA. Paul George making his debut with the Sixers. He scored 15 points in his return from a knee injury. We called their performance rusty, and it's hard to argue with that.
Yeah.
He attempts a 2-point shot. They're down 2, final possession. You try and win that game in that situation, right?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not a huge proponent necessarily of like take a 3 at all costs. I think if you can get to the rim and tie it, I'm totally fine with that. The
problem is after the game he admitted he didn't know what the score was. I think that's my bigger issue. He said he said after the game, I didn't realize I thought we were down by 1. So
okay.
rusty physically and mentally to start the year.
Yeah. I guess in that case, whatever, put it up. I didn't love the shot selection. I mean, Tyrese Maxey was on fire last night, and Paul George kind of looked him off on that final possession and wanted to take it himself. So I think that would be maybe the issue that I have a bigger problem with. And Philly's now 1-5. I mean, played a really good Suns team. Suns are 6-1, by the way. And I think Philly playing them close. Again, it's kind of like Milwaukee, no moral victories. You got to start stacking wins at some point. And they play at the Clippers, at the Lakers in their next 2 games. So, both of those are going to be difficult as long as Embiid is sidelined. And again, we have no idea, when we're going to see Joel Embiid. You're just kind of waiting on the Sixers team, and it's kind of impossible to judge them, but you can't dig yourself too much of a hole, right? Because even once Embiid's back, it's not like every game becomes an auto victory with Joel Embiid out there. We have no idea how many minutes he's going to play. He's not going to play back-to-backs. If he plays one game, is it a guarantee that he's out there the next, even if it's not a back-to-back? I don't know. It already feels like there's more chaos than we thought with the Sixers team, but at least Tyrese Maxey looks fantastic, man. And how about Gershon Yabusele? 19 points, 7 rebounds, 6 assists, and a block off the bench last night. 5 of 11 from 3.
Yeah, he's a guy that I think we can start targeting in the prop world too, because he has a very, very defined role in this team. Started in the preseason, like the way that he played when I watched a bit of Sixers basketball there, and it's rolled right over to the regular season. Stock up, stock down. We'll get to that. And your questions continue to light us up in the comments section. But first, my guy Nick has a message from DraftKings Pick 6.
Here at RotoWire, we're proud to be partnered up with DraftKings Pick 6 this NBA season. Think your team will score more than 100 points tonight? How about your favorite point guard making more than 4 3-pointers? Check out DraftKings Pick 6, the newest way to play fantasy basketball and win cash with DraftKings. Here's how it works. All you got to do is pick 2 to 6 players of the same sport and choose if they'll have more or less of a given stat. So for hoops, we're talking points, assists, rebounds, etc. Lock in those picks, compete against opponents for your shot at huge cash prizes. Go download the new DraftKings Pick 6 app right now and use our code ROTOPICK, ROTOPICK. That's code ROTOPICK for new Pick 6 customers. Play $5, get $50 in Pick 6 credits guaranteed. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org in Connecticut. Must be 18 plus. Age and eligibility restrictions vary by jurisdiction. Pick 6 not available everywhere, including New York and Ontario. Void where prohibited. one per new customer. Bonus awarded as non-withdrawable Pick 6 credits that expire in 30 days. Limited time offer. See terms at pick6.draftkings.com/promos.
Great stuff as always by Nick Whalen. I've got a stock check that I want to get to here. 5 names that I'll tee up to Nick. You can tell me where we're at with these guys. And we'll start towards the top. Victor Wembanyama, my second overall pick. 9th in the NBA in fantasy points per game, 22% from long range. He's actually attempting less shots per game so far this season than last year, which I didn't think would happen. I'm a little bit nervous. I mean, he's still great, but I'm nervous about Wemby right now, not delivering on number 1 overall potential.
I'm not nervous. I think we're just fine here. You know, I play in mostly category leagues, some points leagues as well. So, in category leagues per game value, he's number 3 right now, just behind Nikola Jokic and Anthony Davis. And, I think with Jokic, we maybe underestimated the degree to which he'd have to carry this team. He's averaging 30, 13, 10, 1.5 steals, 1 block, shooting, great percentages as always. Yeah, the scoring volume for Wembanyama has been a little bit disappointing. He's taken 20 shots in only 2 games so far. He had that really bad game against OKC last week that's dragging down some of his numbers, but he had 9 blocks and 3 steals last night, Brandon. I mean, that's really what you're signing up for with Wembanyama. If you're in a category league, the blocks and steals, and specifically the blocks, are just such a massive advantage. I mean, no one else is even really in that stratosphere right now outside of Chet Holmgren. So, we're 2 weeks into the season. It feels like Victor Wembanyama has maybe been a little bit disappointing on balance, and he's still the number 3 player, and he's still averaging 4 blocks per game. He's also shooting 93% at the free throw line, which I think is a huge improvement. He's shooting 42% for the field, which is not great. He's taken a ton of threes, and that's dragging down his percentage. He's shooting 22% from beyond the arc, but over 4 free throw attempts per game, hitting basically all of them. He was a 79% free throw shooter last year. So probably meet in the middle somewhere, but even if he's in the mid 80s, I mean, getting that kind of free throw percentage out of a center is so massive. So yeah, I'm totally fine on Wembanyama. No concerns on my end.
I thought the lob game between Chris Paul and Wembanyama would be unstoppable, and I've been a little bit underwhelmed with what I've seen from that duo, but I appreciate you cooling me down on that. Definitely coming through on the blocks, like I said, dominating in steals and blocks, just need to pick up the pace everywhere else. I'm a little overly reliant on Wembanyama, so that's where the nervousness comes from. But Zach Edey, big game last night, 25 and 12. He also had 4 blocks, easily his best game as a pro. I'm assuming he'd be a stock up guy.
He's got to be, because the stock was very down over the first 4 or 5 games of the year, especially. But he's looked better. I mean, last night was clearly his best game so far. 25, 12, and 4, like you said. Still not playing a ton of minutes, but what I'm focused on mostly is the lack of fouls over his last 5 games. I mean, he had 14 fouls in the first 3 games of the season in like 50 total minutes. Over the last 5 games now, he has, I believe, 10 total fouls, which is a vast improvement. And again, it's not like he's playing 35 minutes a night. They're still being careful with him. There are still certain matchups, I think, where he's going to struggle. But you feel a lot better about Zach Edey right now, just coming off of last night. Certainly than you did a couple of weeks ago. So he was somebody that, there was always going to be somewhat of an adjustment process. The preseason was probably a little too good to be true. But yeah, have to be really encouraged. 11 of 12 from the field last night. He walked into a 3 in transition as well. I mean, he's not going to give you, 1, 2 threes per game, but that is something that I think they want to develop as part of his game. So really good to see that last night against Brooklyn.
He is already such a better NBA player than I ever thought he could be in watching him.
Yeah.
I
didn't
college.
even think he'd play in the NBA 2 years ago.
He looked like the stereotypical dominant center in college that can't move his feet well enough to be in the league. And he's so much more skilled than a lot of us gave him credit for. Karl-Anthony Towns averaging 21, 12, and 3. He's shooting 52% from the field, a blistering 72% from long range. We know that's not going to hold, but like what I see so far from Karl-Anthony Towns, stock up or down in the way that he's fitting in with the New York Knicks and what it means for fantasy.
I think it's got to be stock up, because there's some real questions, at least for me. Anytime a premier player like that switches teams and specifically goes to a team that already has, multiple decent options in Jalen Brunson and Mikal Bridges and OG Anunoby, and he's the guy. The onus is on Karl-Anthony Towns to fit in with that group. right? And they're not necessarily going to adjust around him. And I think this could have gone either way. You look at opening night against the Celtics, and it's like, oh man, they're getting blown off the court. Towns was not really that big of a part of the offense, and a week later he's putting up 44 and 13 in a win over Miami. The rebounding has been super consistent. Obviously, the Knicks don't have a ton of options at center. He's pretty much going to play all of his minutes at the 5, which is huge for the rebounding potential. If you just take out opening night, Brandon, he's averaging 23, 14, 2.5 assists, shooting 52%. Like you said, he's been on fire from 3. That will eventually come down, but he's still going to take 4, 5, 6 a game. They need his scoring. Mikal Bridges is going to be kind of wishy-washy night to night. OG to me is still, they value his defensive contributions a bit more. I think they're going to miss the scoring of Donte DiVincenzo. So, Karl-Anthony Towns has been a top 20 guy so far on the year. I think that's probably about what you'd expect, but I would say I feel better about him now than I did, going into opening night.
Yeah, about what you drafted him to be, but it feels like it's starting to gel. Zion Williamson, I was so high on his prospects coming into this year. I thought we were really starting to see him turn a corner. He has had a blow-up game on the season, 34 points, 10 assists, 6 rebounds the last time that we saw him play, but he's also missed multiple games, which has been the MO of Zion so far in his career. So it's just more of the same as far as Zion. I'm big time stock down right now because I thought he was turning a corner, but perhaps it's stock no change because he's kind of just the same guy that he's been since he entered the league. Great stats, unreliable.
Yeah, it's frustrating because the Pelicans have so many injuries right now that if Zion had played the last 2 games, it's like, here's a ton of opportunity, right? No Herb Jones, no McCollum, no DeJounte. It's like you kind of need Zion to be the guy. When he's out there, at least in the next couple of weeks before those guys come back, it's going to be 20 plus shots per game, you would think. That's kind of what he was doing before this hamstring injury. But yeah, he's missed 3 games already out of the first 8 for New Orleans. That's frustrating. And, I think in points leagues, it's more of a no change for me once he's back, but you're still seeing, some of the same deficiencies as years past if you're playing in category leagues, right? The assists have been there, which is nice. He gave you 10 assists last time out against Indy, but the defensive production is still going to be pretty wishy-washy. He's probably not going to get to a steal per game. We'll see on the blocks. He did have at least 1 block in 4 straight games to begin the year. But the free throw shooting has not been good. He's hovering around 60% right now. Again, small sample-ish to begin the year, but he's taken 9.5 free throws a game. So he's already built a decent sample despite only playing in 5 games so far. And, he's a guy that's been right at 70% each of the last couple of years. You're really hoping he can bump that even to like 75%. And early on, not off to a great start there.
All right, let's wrap the stock check with Tari Eason. Cooled off a bit last night. 7 points, 5 rebounds. He had been lighting it up for a couple of games with the Rockets. The Rockets, another team that's playing really well. Hot ad off the wire. I know not for you in your stake league where you've got like 32 teams. Yeah, he was probably like a 4th round pick for you guys. But stock up or down on Tari Eason, who's been a little bit hot and cold recently.
He's still a top 85 guy right now in per game in 8CAD. And, the big game against Golden State when he had 27, 9, and 7 combined steals and blocks is carrying that. So I would say probably no change. It's more encouraging, I guess, than anything else that he's playing, 18 to sometimes close to 30 minutes, but probably going to settle in like the low to mid 20s because Houston is such a deep team. And you didn't really know who was going to be marginalized coming into the year. And, so far it's been Cam Whitmore, who's not really playing. He didn't even see the floor last night. Reed Shepherd has basically been garbage time only so far. So those are the 2 guys that have really been getting squeezed more so than Tari Eason, who missed so much time last year. We're seeing a lot of Amen Thompson, which is interesting. So yeah, like if you drafted Tari Eason, you probably were coming in with the expectation that he's a bench player and, on certain 4-game weeks, you would throw him out there. But, in terms of being a consistent part of the rotation in Houston, I think that has to be encouraging because they have so many guys that could have gone any direction.
Yeah, and I still think they're figuring things out as far as who they want to be part of that permanent rotation in Houston, but things trending in the right direction for the team as a whole, and Eason is a part of that. We're going to wrap today's episode the way that we always do. We're going to bounce with the bounce. Your questions, rapid fire right now. Shout out to my guy. I'm just gonna call you AM because I don't want to butcher your name. He says, "What up, Nick and Brandon? Good to see you. Lots of love and respect from Indonesia. Love when we get worldly check-ins." Let's follow up with Tari Eason. How do we feel about Tari Eason rest of season 9 cat? What are you thinking?
I mean, I don't know. We just talked about it. I mean, I think it's still a small enough sample that it's kind of tough to project out. But again, he's, as of right now, seems like a guy who I think you could depend on for 20 to 24 minutes per night if you kind of average it out over the course of a 3 or 4 game week. In a shallower league, not somebody who should probably be in your starting lineup. But if you have injury issues, if you got a bunch of players on a 3-game week, or God forbid a 2-game week, I think you're comfortable throwing him out there. But I don't want to belabor it too much since we just talked about him. But I would see no reason why this wouldn't continue. I mean, they don't seem all that interested in giving minutes to someone like Reed Shepherd and Cam Whitmore to begin the year. So right now he's got the advantage.
Yeah, certainly don't want this to become the Tari Eason pod, but they did follow up by saying Donte and Wiggins on waivers. I don't know what they mean. I need more info than Donte.
Donte DiVincenzo. He's the only Donte, I believe, active in the NBA.
Is he the
right
only?
Now.
Is he the only Donte? That doesn't sound right. Can't be the only
Donte. Man. I mean, Donte Exum, I guess, but it's the only Donte with an O, who is active. So, yeah, DiVincenzo's been off to a kind of a weird start too. Still coming off the bench. Like I was convinced and still am that at some point he's going to start for this team. But the minutes of I thought he'd be a 30+ minute per game guy just out of necessity. But he has not been. I mean, he's averaging 10, 3, and 3 with 1.1 steals right now. I still think, like, if I had to start one of those guys on a 4-game week, I would still probably lean DiVincenzo. I think there's going to be a higher floor. He's still going to give you the threes, which is nice. Like, he's going to get up, even if he's only playing 23 minutes in a given game, he's still going to take 6 or 7 threes. So I would personally take DiVincenzo, but it's close. Depends what you need.
Christian asking, is Anthony Black a drop? Thought that we were going to get some run with Anthony Black in the starting lineup. That did not hold. The Magic now starting Tristan da Silva back-to-back games, and the Rook getting some run. He looked a little bit out of sorts against Cleveland, or Dallas rather, but had a blow-up game against Cleveland, and last night I think settled down a little bit. So I would keep an eye on Tristan da Silva. But Anthony Black relegated to bench duty, and if he's not hitting his corner threes and getting steals, there's just not a lot there, so hard to trust him. I would say yes.
Yeah,
I always answer for my Magic guys.
Yeah, I mean, he's played 21 minutes over the last 2 games. Part of the issue is, since Banchero went down, the Magic just can't do anything. I mean, they've scored 85 and 86 points over their last 2 games.
They're the worst offensive team in the NBA without Paolo Banchero.
Yeah, for sure. And, Anthony Black is just really inefficient right now. A guy who's shooting like 25% over the last 5 games. He's turning it over a ton. So if you're in a 9-cat league, that's killing you. He's probably a drop. Yeah. Especially if you're in a 12-team league, you could do a lot better than that.
Like Keon Ellis. We saw him last night, 29 minutes, 7 points, 2 assists, 3 rebounds. Not going to blow you away, but my guy Ant here wants to know if he's worth a pickup.
If you need steals, he may be worth a pickup. I wouldn't expect anything else. Pretty low volume in terms of scoring. He takes a couple threes a night. It's just, your best case scenarios, he goes like 2 for 4. Doesn't really rebound, doesn't really give you assists. It's really just about the steals. If you need steals and you want to just plug somebody in there for that, look to Keon Ellis, but I'm not overly excited about his overall fantasy profile.
Warren wants to know general thoughts on Jonathan Kuminga, who not been exactly lighting up the stat sheet, but he's been decent. I think people are expecting a big surge in production. I think he's a better real life player than fantasy. But what are your thoughts on Kuminga so far?
Yeah, we're waiting for the 3-point shooting to come around. That's been the big thing. I mean, he's been terrible from beyond the arc. And, still over his last 4 games, still giving you like 18 points, 5 rebounds, 2 assists. But those are kind of the less valuable categories, right? It's like you can always, especially in a shallower league, you can find points. You can find 5-6 rebounds a game pretty easily on the waiver wire. The defensive stats, he's been decent in terms of steals, hovering around 1 steal per game, but he's not blocking a ton of shots. He's still turning the ball over fairly frequently. And it was just frustrating, for Curry to miss that stretch. And you're thinking, all right, this is Kuminga time. Like, he's the number 1 option. And, not only was he not even in the starting lineup, but he was still only playing 25, 26 minutes in this deep Warriors rotation. So it's kind of been a worst case scenario start for Kuminga. If you were an optimist on him, I'm not totally sold that the Warriors are going to, keep getting away with playing everybody every single night. At some point, they're just going to stop blowing the doors off of these bad teams. So I would still hold Kuminga. I wouldn't be trying to get off of him for a loss at this point. But yeah, it hasn't been the start that we hoped.
Jack is checking in asking about Cam Thomas. We expected to see this guy put up 30 a night. That has tailed off. He's had 19, 17, and 13 in 3 of his last 4 games. Are you worried at all about the offensive production of Cam Thomas, or are you just thinking he's just going to keep chucking them up?
I think he's going to keep chucking. He's going to keep chucking. And, he had 2 good matchups the last 2 games against Memphis and Detroit. So it's disappointing that he only ended up with 30 total points in those games, but he's also 1 of 11 from 3 during that span. That's kind of how it's gone. Like he was 7 of 13 from 3 on opening night. Then he's 3 of 5, 2 of 8, 1 of 8, 1 of 6, 4 of 11, 1 of 7, 0 of 4. So it's kind of going to ebb and flow based on whether or not the 3-point shot is falling. I will say he's not giving you much in terms of rebounds at all. The assists have been okay, about what you'd expect, 3 or 4 per game. Should be getting you close to a steal per game. He's not going to block any shots. But keep an eye on the free throw shooting as well. He's only taken 5 free throws over the last 2 games. Like if you're in a category league, that is one of the things that he gives you outside of the points and the threes is, he has been a high volume, high efficiency free throw shooter throughout his career. He was at 86% 2 years ago, 86% last year, off to a 92% start at the line. And he takes enough that actually matters.
That's Cam Thomas, ladies and gentlemen. Cat Soup, tier 1 handle right there, wants to know our opinions on Dyson Daniels so far. He's been a nice little fantasy piece if you've been able to grab him.
Yeah, really good player. Really good get by the Hawks. Last night he was just victimized by this terrible matchup where everybody in Atlanta struggled. So I wouldn't read too much into that one. But if you drafted Dyson Daniels, you're in it for the defensive stats, and that's exactly what he's given you so far. I think the scoring has probably been better than you'd expect. Even after a dud last night, he's still at 13 points per game, 4 rebounds, 2.2 steals per game. That's huge. I mean, the consistency with which Dyson Daniels racks up steals, like you can put him in your lineup just about any week, especially at a 4-game week, and just feel good about that solo category production. And if you get a couple threes, if you get a 15-point game in there, if you get an 8-rebound game in there like he had earlier in the season against OKC, that's great. But in a category league, especially a deeper category league, I mean, he is a massive, massive asset just in terms of the steals category. Led the NBA in steal percentage last season, and that has carried over.
All right, last one. We'll roll with Kenny. Thoughts on Bogdan Bogdanovic when he comes back for the Atlanta Hawks?
It's interesting because I think these two are somewhat tethered at the hip, right? Bogdanovic and Dyson Daniels. We're going to see a lot more Dyson Daniels as long as Bogdanovic is out. I like Bogdanovic a lot this year. It's unfortunate that he went down on opening night. He's going to miss probably at least 2 more weeks, maybe more. He's going to be reevaluated sometime later in November. But this is a Hawks team that desperately needs offensive production, right? You can't really, it's really a 2-man show right now with Jalen Johnson and Trae Young. It's like you're not necessarily relying on a ton of scoring from Dyson Daniels. DeAndre Hunter is still questionable night to night. We'll see what you get out of Risa Shea. Anything you get out of a Kungwu and Capella, that kind of feels like a bonus. So I think Bogdanovic, when he comes back, is actually going to be set for a really nice season. You think about how well he played in the Olympics. You don't want to put too much stock into that, but that was kind of a reminder of like, this guy's capable of more. He's always been a bench player in the NBA. And he probably will come off the bench for them, but I think he's going to play a ton of minutes. I think he's going to be a 30-minute per night guy when he's healthy because the Hawks need him.
Is there anything on Wednesday night? Have you taken a peek at the Wednesday night slate yet? Have you thought about any bets that you might be placing on Wednesday? I'll reiterate: Warriors plus 7.5 feels pretty good. It's a key number in the NBA to get above 6.5. And I think the way the Warriors have been covering the spread, playing defense, they should be able to keep this game close in prime time.
Yeah, that one's on the road in Boston, and that always scares me because the Celtics
terrifying.
The Celtics take so many threes. They're taking 50 threes a game, and it's like if they just hit enough threes, I don't know if like the Warriors' level of defense really matters. And Golden State, they're getting good minutes out of Trace Jackson Davis. I still think it's a plus matchup for Boston. So that would be. I'm not saying I would take the Celtics necessarily, but that would be more of a stay away for me. That Magic Pacers game is really interesting. It's like I want to take the under 222.5. because the Magic just can't score, but I could see that changing against the Pacers team that feels like it gives up 120 to everybody. I would lean Grizzlies at home against the Lakers. Maybe just grab the money line there. This Lakers team, coming off a loss to Detroit, like we said earlier, the bench has been a major issue for them. But really, I mean, the team that I would continue to ride right now, there are 2 that I really like on tomorrow's slate. I'm just going to keep taking the Cavs until proven otherwise. I think you're getting a banged up Pelicans team. The Cavs just haven't really had any letdowns yet. I think that starting lineup is so rock solid. They should get some pieces back tomorrow who were out last night. And then I would look at the Thunder -4 on the road at Denver. I know Denver is always going to carry that cachet. They kind of got things back on the rails right now, but a lot of the advanced numbers still don't look great for this Denver team. I think they could end up missing Aaron Gordon tomorrow night. Who knows on Jamal Murray. So I think that number sitting at 4 right now in favor of OKC, that could end up moving, a couple of points depending on the injury situation. And the Thunder have just been the markedly better team so far, right? I mean, It's not even close. And yeah, playing in Denver, it's always going to be tough, but I would ride OKC there.
Yeah, and I think OKC, they play enough where OKC is used to that. I'm already seeing some market movement on that. I see 4.5 on my book here in Florida. But that's going to do it for us this week on the RotoWire Fantasy Basketball Podcast. 4 episodes per week on this channel, so make sure you keep it locked. All of them presented by DraftKings Pick 6. I've been your host, Brandon Kravitz. He's Nick Whalen. Get out and vote. Go be somebody today.